Well, here's something I've not done before. Bearing in mind I'm an electronics engineer who specialises in two-way radio and always happy to do UK legal CB radios and always have done since '81. Citizens Band magazine was a magazine that started just before CB was legal. It came as a kind of uh, shall I say, supplement within hobby electronics, and then it branched out on its own about a year before CB became legal. I've got those hobby electronics magazines somewhere sticking around in a loft being eaten by mice, but we always we always bought Citizens Band magazine. It's not because I'm a CB enthusiast, because I'm not. I'm a service engineer. But I wanted to see what the scene was. So, at the time we had a TV and audio shop doing HMV products mainly in Yorkshire. And then when CB became legal, I thought, well, I'll do CB radio servicing because, and then at that kind of point, I spent 16 years working at Nottingham Radio, and then subsequently for about another 5 years working at as a communications consultant at Bradford, which is where I inherited Mr. Chippy. My late mother then became terminally ill, and everything then had to be done from home. So I've always worked as a church organist, and I've also worked as a church organ builder. Perhaps I have some illness that makes me do 3 jobs. But I like to do 1 hour here and 1 hour there and so on. Now it's a nasty cold day at the moment, so the bellows on our organ and the jobs in 2 churches, it's too cold for me to work, so we'll do electronics today. So here's some non-electronics. Citizens Band magazine, and this is from October 1988. October 1988. One of the viewers of this channel in the United States, oh, there's the Thunderpole, when it was Freeman and Pardo doing it, and he said to me, I've done a search, I'll put a link in the description to find this, and then you can backtrack and find others. I wrote about 6 articles in the mid to late 80s for this magazine, but I didn't do much because I wasn't that thrilled with the reviews they did of CB radios, which were not, shall we say, non-technical. Everything came up smelling of roses, and not all sets do. And today I've just had an email from a company in China. Would I do a video review of their DAB radio? No, I won't. And if I did accept their free gift $49.99 radio to do a review, and it happened to be a Citizens Band radio, they probably wouldn't like the results if I started criticising anything that was worth criticising. Perhaps it would be wonderful, but we don't do DAB radios, so not going to do it. So this is one which he'd spotted, and I've printed this out and bound it so we can actually look at it. And I did this article at the end, which they've called Taking the Mic. I didn't call it Taking the Mic, but they did. And it's talking about mics on the front, which is what my article was about. Sometimes they're under my real name, and sometimes they're under my Tango 21 name. So we've kind of got the editorial here. Is it Eamon Percival was the editor at the time? So it's goes on to talk about. Oh, we've got a BBC computer with 2 floppy drives and a monitor. Yes, there are Wallis still around, and that's when the radio investigation services were at Waterloo Bridge House in London. I bet that's demolished now. I, for one, will not go out and spend good money on a new CPT rig. Good. Well, I find it totally unusable. We get 35 miles range on the UK FM band. from the Nottingham area. We can get out that way fine. I could send Mr. Chippy out 35 miles in the car and I'd be able to talk to him fine. We get out probably about 12 miles in an easterly direction. I know we get out 18 miles in a northerly direction, but our southerly direction, there's a great big hill at Colsterworth, and we just get just under 10 miles. As soon as we get to that hill, it's gone. CPT, well, it can be 1 mile because of the interference. Now, what I call foreign interference, it might be what people call DX, but it's no good to me because I'm wanting to talk to people specifically who like Mr. Chippy when we're doing the tests. I love these letters though, it's always fantastic. I have a realistic handheld, and my son's snapped the telescopic aerial. No. So, support was 7 years. This is 1988, so the support had gone. And I had that 1005, and it worked out as a nice set, but it got a broken aerial. So unless you buy a set which has got an intact aerial and use it for parts, or you import a set which would be illegal in this country for American use, for example, but has an intact aerial and you bought it cheap, we did that with I think it was a realistic 207, or was it a 202, to recover the aerial off. It only paid $5, so even with the 20-odd pound postage, it was worth it, because it made the aerial under £30, which I think was viable. So, have a look at this. Oh, a Maxcom 4E. Can't go wrong there. He's talking about having a 6-volt car. Well, Tandy's used to do an up switcher. 6 volts in, 12 volts out. I had one of those once in a box of junk and sorted it out. So it looks like they're having a mass eyeball here. I really want my handle on a car, don't I? Trucking information. And this is where we diversify a bit. Somebody's radio receiver which has got some good shortwave coverage. Advertisements are absolutely great, aren't they? I wonder what illegal stuff people are selling is the other one, even back then. So they've got 77104, 77805 for $89.95. Could sell those all day, couldn't you, at that price? Moonraker Minor, they weren't that brilliant. Major seemed to be alright, and the Master works great. DNT Contact 40, have we done that? Not sure if we have. It's CPT, I've probably got one lurking. We may end up stopping doing CPT sets because we may be absolutely, as my title says, UK FM only. So QSL's never interested in me as a radio ham either, but I realise there are people who do that kind of thing. And there's some amusing cards, aren't there? What's on in the Scottish scene? So, back to some advertisements. So we've got the amateur transceiver Uniden 2830, which is really a illegal CB masquerading as a ham radio set. 77104, 77805, audio line 342 they've got for $69.95. So considering that was $149.99 recommended retail, that was clearly being cleared at that time in 1988, which it would have been because it was a 1981 set. Gson $59.95, we don't know which version. Maxcom 7E for £85. Gson handheld for £72. Is that the emergency set I've got kicking around here? A Euro 2 Not sure about that. Uniden 100 for 69.95. Uniden 200 for 97.95. Uniden 300 base station for £147. Uniden 400, which is a CPT version. We've got one on the shelf, which we haven't done yet, but again, CPT, I'm not sure whether we're going to. And the DNT Contact 40, which is £65. I think it seems to recall that works all right. Gone are the days when we could get 3 to 5 amp power supplies at £12.50. I can't even get a transformer for £12.50. We were making those 3 to 5 amp replicas of the illegal, not illegal, but they were banned in the UK because of safety issues, like the G-Col and so on. And Altai was one of those bands which could be under the unsafe ones. It was down to fuse holder and only switching the neutral and not switching the live. It was silly things and lack of insulation on live terminals inside. So for a small upgrade, they could be sorted really, really well, and we've done those videos. But £12.50 for a 3 to 5 amp power supply, bring that back. I'm not a lover of switch mode power supplies, probably because I was put off for them for life in Thorn 3000 colour televisions, which came out in 1969. But I expect half that reliability was down to capacitors. Subscribe to the magazine. Sharman's Wholesale, he's retired and is sold out. So obviously that's wholesale only, and fine people to deal with. And this is one of the things which started me stopping to get the magazine not far off this point. I am not interested in in-car entertainment, as it became called. You buy a car, it comes with a car radio or whatever they have, and that's exactly how I want it to be. Full stop. As a musician, I ought to play that and see what it is. And this is my article on wiring mics and how to identify the wires which are going to do what. These are their photos and their diagrams. That should be a 5-pin in 180 degrees, but they haven't kind of shown it as that. But that doesn't matter, it's still the same. So what we were doing on this, it was how to find what the leads do in a particular mic, and then we'd got the pinouts for 100 different rigs, and obviously things like the Bandtone breaker phone, I'd put special audio line 340. Should have sent 2, they missed the 2 off. And the 2003 remote was another special one. So we did the Harvard Good Buddy, and this is wrong because it isn't that. So that's interesting. So that proves to me that the sample I'd had, somebody had rewired the mic socket in the radio, which we do see. So that is not good. I must write to Citizens Band magazine in my time machine and get that corrected. So yeah, there's 100 radios we could wire a mic to. So what have we got here? Palmer were another wholesaler and trade-only wholesaler. When I was at Nottingham Radio, we did use Palmer, and we used to get our standard replacement microphones for that. We remember we were doing business radio only, really, at Nottingham Radio. We'd always help somebody with a CB radio, but we weren't actually actively involved in doing anything specifically. But we did need extension speakers and PL259s and adapters, and Palmer, along with Sharman's, were one of those wholesalers. And I went over to Manchester to go and see what they had. And in those days, they were operating from a big house which had turned into their offices and warehouse, a big double-fronted house. But I think subsequently they took up a unit. And they seem to just disappear off the face of the earth because we still have a requirement for mics and speakers, but they're not around to do it. They seem to go over to cellular phone accessories, which were found in supermarkets and so on. You know, like, what would you call that? Oh dear. Is that concessions within a shop? But anyway, they seem to have disappeared. But if they're still around, say hello and we'll have some mics and speakers off you again. So obviously there's no prices here because it was a wholesaler. That's an example of what they do. Pen Pals Yeah, right. 4 pages of action lady. She looks about business with that clipboard. Rumours. So we have a European Albrecht there, which is not a UK approved set. Just what does it say? Yeah, PR27D, so it would have to be PR27GB for UK. The Uniden 400, which was the first, they say was the first, probably the first. I think the DNT Contact 40 was the first we saw from the wholesalers. Mass eyeball. Yes, don't know what's going on in those pictures. Truck King. They seem to have. They seem to end up at Newark and then disappeared. I was never happy about, and still aren't happy about, people selling things that aren't 100% legal, but it carries on. Then the small things, small ads. I did go to Truck King to buy a base aerial. I was on business in on business in Watford, and they were at Watford, so I wanted the base aerial for here. It was one of those got quite a supposedly posh loading coil, and it worked all right, but it didn't last very long. The Perspexy kind of supports kind of broke after about 3 years, and that was the end of that. But it was, I think it was a 5/8 wave. I've forgotten what it was even was. It was about £70, so it was quite nice. And I did have a Sigma 4 when we were in Yorkshire, and the trouble was that is it didn't work locally very well, and then came out about 40 miles later. So it was good for the range, but and theoretically a 7/8 wave isn't UK approved. I don't think you'd get pulled up for that. So some of the small ads and some of the small businesses are absolutely great, and I visited some of these at the time and had a look at what they had and kept my mouth shut that I was also involved. So what's in, is there a Nottingham one? South Yorkshire. 5 Odeon Arcade, Doncaster. T-shirts with your name on. Tenor Master still going, I seem to recall. I seem to remember there at various radio rallies. But you know, even myself, I might have. I'm 59 now, so if I'd have, you know, I was early 20s when CB happened. I was 19. I was 19, and luckily I'd already got a shop. You know, at that age, not everybody has. Mind you, it was rented; it wasn't bought. ABCB, I was in the Association for British Citizens Band. I'll just zoom in on that if we can. That was Nottingham, and so ABCB, PO Box 13, North PDO, Nottingham was the address, and the chairman of the Radio Club Nottingham, to which this was affiliated. It wasn't a CB club, although it was primarily CB. Anyone who got a radio license, whether it was marine, amateur, business, or citizens band, could join the club. And all you paid your £5 or whatever it was, and you showed your radio license. I thought that was really good. You could be an associate member, or was it, what did they call it? Where you didn't have a radio license, you could be a something kind of member. And the Association for British Citizens Band was based at Liverpool. I'm trying to think who was in charge. He was a Conservative MP, which was quite amusing, because the man who was chairman at the Radio Club Nottingham, his CB handle was Left Man, and he was a Labour MP. So that was That was always an instant clash. And I gave him a lift somewhere. He ran a car repair business. He was a mechanic, and he'd been in the army during the war, and changing engines on Bedford trucks in the desert. I'm talking about the Second World War, and I had to take him somewhere, and he was directing me to where I was taking him, and he said, "We turn left at the next junction." Well, he says it's left all the way as it should be. It being Labour, it was always amusing. And we went up to Liverpool to go and see whoever the person was who was in charge of ABCB, and we had a meeting there. And we'd take it. One meeting would be at Nottingham, one meeting would be at Liverpool. We did it like that, took it in turns, which was good, and it was a good organisation. And we went to he was holding this meeting at the Conservative club, wherever it was, and it was pretty basic, like a wooden hut with a sink in it, and typical Tory cuts he came out with, So I was always amused by that. But very sad when he passed away, and he wasn't terribly old when he did pass away. I think he was upper 60s. So that was that, and it was the March Hare Public House on Carlton Road where the radio club met at Nottingham. I went to there was a Chinese takeaway which also did fish and chips, and I went there and had fish cake and chips. And fish cake in Nottingham is going to be a breadcrumb type of affair. If you're in Yorkshire, it's different. So we're talking about a breadcrumb fish cake. I went in there and had this fish cake and chips. Well, you could have broken a pane of glass with this fish cake. I don't know how long it had been cooked and sat there, but it was absolutely rock hard. I didn't go back there. So that was them. Let's take this camera back to its normal position. And then we'll just pop it out a bit from there. And then we have some of Bremmy's dodgy things. I like the power supplies and some of the accessories, but obviously they were doing things which I wouldn't have been happy about at all. We did the BRS 27 3-amp power supply, and you notice it was $19.95 at a time when cheap ones were $12.95. So they were always a premium product, but 40 years later I changed 2 capacitors and things working a treat. And the 5-amp one, we've got a 10-amp one somewhere kicking around, and on church organs sometimes you're going to be putting pedals which are pneumatic action onto electric action. I'm not going to bore you, but they need a power supply because the average voltage on organs is 15 volts. So 13.8 volt power supply turned up to 15 is cheaper than an organ power supply. For some reason, I mean, look, there's £76 there, and today you could still get a 10-amp power supply for that kind of money, though it would probably be switch mode. But an organ power supply for 10 amps would be £280, So we were using these. The only trouble was the 220 volt ones, the capacitors needed changing from new because we were 240 volts at the time in the UK, and that 10% difference took those capacitors, and we found the hard way when they blew up. So every time we bought these power supplies, we did have to change some capacitors. And on the back page we've got another Palmer advertisement. So there we are. There's a nostalgic look through the 1988 October 1988 Citizens Band magazine. Now my friend Mark ZX2 at Nottingham, who I've known since we worked together at Nottingham Radio, and he's licensed to G7NDJ. He has a collection of every UK magazine ever published, including ones before it was legal. Some of the small format ones. There was one, I forgot what it was even called, but it was printed at Blackpool, and he's got every one. And I was saying to him that it'd be lovely to look at some of the articles I'd done in years gone by, and it's one thing he'll probably thumb through it at some point, but and then lend me the magazine so I can scan it. But here we are with this American organisation who have all these scans available. They haven't got everything, and it'd be nice if some of those gaps could be filled by borrowing some of Mark's magazines, scanning them, and then sending them to them to help their worthy effort. So not what we normally do, and we have got some other things. I want to look at some AA batteries that you USB charge. We've got some of those to play with. We've got another new PNI set to look at, and we'll probably do something technical today, and I really must put that Murphy DS602 to bed and get it sent back. I do want it to be less hummy than it is on our tests. So thank you for watching. Nostalgic discussion down memory lane from 1988 of Citizens Band, the UK magazine, which ran from 1980 to about 1994, I seem to recall.